What's up, guys? We're out here doing part 2 of our big bore adventure bike shootout. We took them out in the street for part 1, see how they handled the road, and now we're out here in the dirt. We've got the Yamaha Super Tenere, the KTM 1290 Super Adventure R, the Suzuki V-Strom 1000 XT, the BMW R1200 GS Adventure, the Triumph Tiger 1200 XCA, and the Honda Africa Twin Adventure Sports. So we did part 1 in the street. We took these bikes to see how they handled the road, and now we're out here in the dirt to see what they do out here. And we've got here ourselves a motley crew of dirt riders of various disciplines. To our left here, to your right, we've got Darwin Yeager, flat track extraordinaire, Scott Rousseau, longtime career dirt rider, myself, Brent, Billy Tinnell, adventure rider, as well as a dirt bike trail rider. And we got Jamin Mathis with Wrench Motorcycle Service, owner-operator up in Hollywood, California. We've had all the bikes outfitted with Continental TKC 80s, and so we're seeing what they can do out here in the dirt. So one little side note, you may notice that there's only 6 bikes here, whereas the part 1 we had 7. Unfortunately, we couldn't get a Ducati Multistrada for this portion of the test. We would have loved to have had one, but the timing just didn't work out, so we had to roll with it. So if you haven't caught our part 1 2018 Big Bore Adventure Shootout, definitely check it out. But if you have, you probably noticed we ran into some complications. One of our bikes, the Africa Twin, took a tumble and poked a hole in the stator cover. Lost all of its lifeblood. Oil came pouring down the trail.
Ooh, there we go.
Jesus.
So we had to reevaluate part 2, and the BMW here were our winners of the street portion. So now with all the proper tires, we're gonna see how these things do off-road. All right, so this wraps up our part 2 2018 Big Bore ADV Shootout. As you can see, the sun's setting, and we put in a full day of riding these bikes off-road, and a lot of these bikes kind of surprised us more than you think they would. Clearly, the Honda Africa Twin and the KTM 1290 Super Adventure R are the more dirt bike style bikes, clearly with their 21-inch front tire, their taller suspension, and more dirt bike style ergos. Whereas the rest of the bikes are, you know, clearly a little bit more road biased, but especially with these TKC 80 Continental tires, they all hooked up pretty darn well, if I must say myself. The Honda Africa Twin, it's probably the most dirt bike feeling bike out of all of them. And with its DCT automatic transmission, which you can shift, you know, via the 2 triggers on the left handlebar, it makes riding this thing off-road really easy. Never having to worry about being in the right gear is awesome, because you can focus on your line and you don't ever have to worry about stalling. If you do find yourself in a too tall of a gear, you can boom, downshift, and you know, instantly you're in the next lower gear. And it works very, very well. What did you guys think about these bikes? Scott?
Well, for me, Brent, I can break this down into basically there's 2 categories of bike here, and I don't care what the scales say about them. There's 3 bikes here that to me feel really heavy in the dirt, and there's 3 bikes here that don't. The 3 bikes that feel really heavy, of course I'm standing behind one of them right now, the Super Tenere. Probably the heaviest feeling bike in this shootout for me. However, it's not without redeeming qualities. I was really impressed with the suspension on this motorcycle and how well it handled the rough stuff today. It's a little bit more infuriating when you're trying to do things like turn off the ABS. There's a trick to that a lot of people who are Tenere fans are well versed in now, which involves, you know, putting it on the center stand and running it in 2nd gear to get the light to turn on. Other than that, you know, just not a big fan overall of this bike. I wish I were. There's, like I said, there's some things that I like about it, but there's other things that I don't. Triumph and the BMW, same way, big heavy bikes. Both work really well, but you know, the other thing that you think about there is there's a lot of money at stake with those 2. You know, both of those bikes are over $22,000 as tested. So I get down to the 3 bikes that I really like, which are the KTM, the Honda, and the Suzuki. And I think maybe the Suzuki has a little bit quicker steering because of the 19-inch wheel, but at the end of the day, it's the bike that I would probably want to be on the most, just because of its seating position for a short-legged guy like me. Easy riding power, good transmission, easy, controls, and just overall the price, 15 grand, a little more than 15 grand. That's a killer price for a bike in this category. So the other 2 I would take on any given day and be totally happy with them, but I think every day, any day, I'd take the Suzuki.
How about you, Darwin? What did you think about these bikes?
So I come from a motocross background, and for me personally, my personal favorite was the Africa Twin. It was the closest to, for me, a motocross bike. As you alluded to, the 21-inch front wheel, not much difference there from a motocross bike, if any. 86 horsepower, I found the engine to be phenomenal, all the way from the bottom end, all the way to the top. I was a little bit apprehensive when I first got on it because of the DCT transmission. But I mean, you adjust quickly. Like I said, it's nice just being able just to click with the click of a thumb. You're up a gear, down a gear, whatever else. The handling of the bike I found to be phenomenal. I believe it has the most, it's 9.7 inches of travel, I believe, which is the most out of all the bikes you see here. So personally, that would be my personal favorite. So for me, with the price point, 16.7, I mean, you can't go wrong with the Honda Africa Twin. Yeah, next in line, I was surprised with the KTM. Closely resembles, once again, another motocross bike. And then after that, the dark horse for me, the surprise of all the bikes you see here was actually the Suzuki V-Strom. With the price point 15.1, I believe. 19-inch front wheel was a bit different for me, but I got used to it relatively quickly. The motor was phenomenal, the handling, everything about this bike was great. And personally, this is my first time riding any of these bikes, and I had an absolute blast.
How about you, Jamin? What do you think?
I both really like the KTM and the Africa Twin as well. I think if it came down to it, I would have to go with the KTM. But it's kind of like it works out in the end with the price point because this is a little more expensive. But you know, you get a lot more stuff with this and quite a bit more capable street bike. I preferred the Africa Twin as far as like the more technical I got, the happier I was there. But the seat height is just a little bit too much for me. And the KTM has kind of my preferable seat height. And something I gotta mention with an adventure bike is that there's no cruise control on a throttle-by-wire bike. I don't know, that's kind of a bummer.
Yeah, for these bikes, you know, they are adventure touring bikes, so you're going to be putting some miles on them, that's for sure. And like you said, you know, the one thing that we did note on our part 1 ride was that it didn't have cruise control. I almost feel old, you know, saying that, like, you know, who needs cruise control? But when you're laying down hundreds, if not thousands of miles, it's nice to just give your right hand a rest. But how about you, Billy? What did you think?
Well, I have to say that I kind of came in here with some preconceptions about these bikes because I've ridden almost all these bikes with the exception of the KTM and the Yamaha. Especially owning a Triumph myself, I expected that to kind of stand out a little bit more for me. And while that was a lot of fun on the flat roads, it was not quite as much fun on any of the rough stuff because it's just, of course, too big to really handle anything, you know, without bouncing all over the place. But it is still completely capable, and I'm, of course, pushing it way beyond its boundaries by, you know, ripping it through third gear through whoops. But I really enjoyed the Africa Twin and the KTM. Those bikes were, just like Darwin said, the Africa Twin feels like a dirt bike. It feels like everything that you would want out of this genre of motorcycle. It does everything well. It's got all the usable power in every range of the RPMs. It wants to throw itself around in just the right places, and it's light, flickable, and it just, as for someone who's a little bit taller, of course, it feels good for me. The only thing that I was really wary about was the DCT. Like, I've never ridden a bike with that. That was a little unnerving at first, but within, what, a minute of me getting on it, I was hucking it up that hill, no problem. You know, it just takes a quick second of like, reset your brain, and then you're like, oh, this is great. This thing has all the power all the time, anywhere I need it. The KTM was great as far as riding on the little bit of rough stuff. Suspension was great. Felt, again, like a dirt bike. And again, I'm going to agree with Darwin. The sleeper really was the V-Strom. It is, for the price point of what this bike is, It's light, it's flickable, it's able to like really get loose on a lot of the stuff. I was jumping it all over the place. The only downside the only thing I really didn't like about it was the smaller front wheel. It felt like I was pushing a lot of the softer stuff, but it's so light that you just overcome it. You just get on the throttle and it just straightens itself out. So, but I think if I had to make a choice for myself, what I'm going to put in my garage, and this is including the fact that I own a Triumph and I would have to get rid of my beloved Tiger, I would actually go with the Africa Twin.
Interesting. So we've talked about a lot of these bikes already, but the one bike we haven't really talked about, the winner of the Part 1 street test, and that's the BMW back here. No doubt about it, it is a big motorcycle. It's 642 pounds, full of gas, ready to rock and roll. On the street, it does fantastic. And on the dirt, I thought it did pretty well too. It really did a nice job of, staying even keel and gliding over just about everything. You really kind of, as soon as the wheels start turning on that bike, almost all of its weight just kind of melts away. So Darwin, tell us a little bit about what you thought of the Triumph.
So the last bike I rode today was the Triumph 1200XC Tiger, and I was thoroughly impressed. For me, I kind of viewed it as, like I said, I'm more of a motocross guy, but the motor on this was surprisingly manageable, all the way from bottom to mid. It was very smooth. It comes with the WP components on it. So for me, I kind of look at it as a very base level, entry level motorcycle if you're just getting into adventure riding. Because like I said, it's nothing, the motor like a Africa Twin or the KTM, which hits very hard. This is more manageable and more tolerable and kind of equates to a more smoother ride. So.
And it's the only triple of the group. Everything else is a twin. But surprisingly, I thought it did pretty well off-road. It is a more street biased bike, I think, but off-road, especially in its off-road pro mode, I was kind of almost blown away by how well it handled in the dirt. It gets rid of the ABS, and it also allowing you to lock up the rear end. And the motor is just super tractable, which makes riding off-road, especially in looser stuff, much more manageable.
I think another thing you need to mention about the Triumph as well is the fact that how easy it is to switch all of the rider aids off. That makes this thing so much more nice to be transitioned straight from the freeway right to the off-road, and it's like a quick, couple pushes of buttons, especially compared to the rigmarole thing we have to do with the Super Tenere. And so whereas this, you just pull off real quick, switch over to off-road pro mode, and you're off to the races.
For me, the big hang-up with the Triumph is that it's $23,000 and the BMW is $24,000.
It's a lot of motorcycle.
And the stuff you get with the BMW, it just feels a little bit better.
It's pretty clear that they are in the same class though at that price level. I mean, it's clear that Triumph, I think I said this in the first part of this test, Triumph's clearly coming after BMW. Now you can argue how successful they're being, but there's no doubt that the 1200 XCA is clearly gunning for the GS.
So we're gonna wrap it up like we always do. And I'm gonna ask you guys, if you had to spend your own money to put one of these bikes in your garage, which one would you pick? Jamin?
The KTM, in spite of some of his aesthetic choices. The Georgia O'Keeffe headlight doesn't do it for me.
It definitely takes a little bit of, it's got to grow on you a little bit.
Maybe it will. Maybe it'll be like a Porsche Panamera, where it was like the ugliest car you ever saw. And then I shouldn't bash on Porsche.
Might be going a little too far.
Yeah.
All right, so you're taking the KTM.
KTM.
Scott?
I'm sticking with the Suzuki. Like I said, performance per dollar here, boys. I mean, to me, that was the bike that, just fit me well, worked well in all the conditions. Like, yeah, it didn't win any single category, but it was right there in all of them. And I think that Suzuki should be really proud of, what they've done with this motorcycle for this year. It's a great bike for 15 grand. I'm in.
Darwin?
If I'm spending my own money, and like I said, first time riding adventure bikes, I'd go with the Africa Twin. I'm a taller stature guy, 5'11", $180, and it fit me very well. So I might be adding another motorcycle to the collection here real soon.
Right on.
Yeah, don't tell my Triumph, but I'm fighting you for that.
Well, I guess there you have it. Billy already said he wants to put the Africa Twin in his garage. Me, personally, it's such a toss-up between the Africa Twin and the KTM. I really like how each bike handles. I think they both look great. I'm a little bit partial to the Honda as far as looks go, but if I had to pick one of these two to put in my garage, I'm with Jamin. I'm going with the KTM. It just has more grunt than any of these bikes. I felt it has more of a dirt bike chassis. You know, you can really ride it aggressively off-road. You can ride it aggressively on-road too. It's almost like a hooligan bike with the way it makes its power. You know, it's just everything's right there off the bottom. It really kind of makes you want to ride the thing aggressively. So my pick's with the KTM. So this basically wraps up our part 2 of our 2018 big bore adventure bike shootout. And we're losing sun, we're losing light, and we're a good couple hundred miles from home. So we're gonna wrap this thing up and hit the road. For the full story, with the full write-up explaining all the bike's different strengths and weaknesses, head on over to Motorcycle.com.
Okay, all right. So how many guys actually crashed today? Raise your hand.
Hey man, these things are adventure bikes.
He still has to ride out of here.
Yeah, I still got to ride home, so
let's put him on.
With lack of sunlight, so that might change rather quickly.
Yeah, let's
put you on the heaviest bike with all the Pioneers.
Yeah,
they did survive amazingly well today because a couple of them were pretty gnarly little dumps.
You got it?
I'm really surprised that we're not towing one home this time.
I mean, it wouldn't be, you know, typical Mo fashion if we didn't wreck one of the bikes. But you know, knock on wood.
But it was nice because you did it in front of all of us, man.
Good thing you brought your special tool here too.
Let's get packed up and get out of here.
All right, yeah, let's do it.